Down even if it cost us our lives.
The supporters say it was a massacre. The military say they acted in self-defence. Will be live in Cairo, also tonight. A special celebration for Wimbledon winner Andy Murray at number 10, as the Prime Minister says he deserves a knighthood. More challenging maths, science and history. The government publishes its new curriculum for schools in England.
Look at that one. Look how his nose is up in the air. Oh my God. Oh, it's an accident.
The San Francisco plane crash, officials say it was travelling slower than it should have been.
Oh my God.
And coming up in the sport here on BBC News, Graham Swan says England's cricketers want to tap into the feel-good factor created by Andy Murray and the Lions.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. More than 50 supporters of the deposed Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi have been killed in a confrontation outside the barracks in Cairo, where it's believed he's being held after last week's coup. His party, the Muslim Brotherhood, has accused the army of a massacre. The military say they acted in self-defence. Our Middle East correspondent Aleem Makboul is in Cairo for us now. Aleem.
Yes, really shocking events for Egyptians to wake up to, and they happen just a short distance from here. Just along that street at the end of it is where those 50 people were killed and over 400 injured, apparently by their own security forces. A lot of supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood and of the deposed president are heading here to offer their prayers for those who died. It's plunged families into grief and Egypt even further into crisis. While accounts of what happened differ, what we do know is dozens of supporters of the deposed president, Mohamed Morsi, have been left dead. Mobile phone footage appears to show police and soldiers firing at a crowd. It's outside the building where many believe the army's detaining the former president, and it's where, at dawn, pro-Morsi demonstrators were staging a sit-in. Victims were first taken to a field clinic close to the site.
This is my documentation. Policemen opened the gunshot on them without any objection from them, actually. And the military forces was just observing. They did nothing.
In chaotic scenes, the dead and the hundreds of wounded were then moved to hospitals that could barely cope. Well, this hospital close to the scene is filled with casualties like this, with gunshot wounds, even spilling out here into the corridor. Now, emotions are running very high indeed, but everyone we've spoken to insists that the firing was unprovoked. It's not the way Egypt's dangerous rifts are going to be healed.
My brother, this morning, we got a call that told us that he was shot. I came here. Turns out that he was shot on the left side of his chest. Absolutely outraged. This was a totally peaceful sit-in.
But the military insists its soldiers were shot at first and that an armed group had tried to infiltrate their compound. Egyptian state TV has been broadcasting video, apparently showing some of the demonstrators firing weapons. At the spot where the killings took place, there remains a standoff between soldiers and supporters of Mohamed Morsi. The army's warned them to leave. Muslim Brotherhood supporters, though, have gone from the shock of losing their leaders to utter fury at what's happened since. Their party has called for an uprising. The potential for more violence is clear, and today's events have made it even harder to see a way out of Egypt's descent into civil conflict. Well, a lot of the Morsi supporters here say they're upset that the army hasn't expressed regret for what happened, only issued more threats, and the Muslim Brotherhood in turn has called for an intifada, an uprising. What we can say for certain is that a political solution to Egypt's crisis, for now at least, seems out of the question.
Aleem, thank you. Aleem Makboul joining us there from Cairo. Now, it has been a whirlwind 24 hours for the new Wimbledon champion Andy Murray. He says he didn't want to go to sleep last night for fear that he'd wake up and find his victory had all been a dream. This afternoon, he went to Downing Street to be met by the Prime Minister, who said he couldn't think of anyone more deserving of a knighthood. Here's our sports editor, David Bond.
Andy Murray is the Wimbledon champion.
It's an image we'll never tire of seeing. The golden moment when Andy Murray ended Britain's agonising wait for a Wimbledon champion. Nearly 24 hours after rewriting history, it was off to Downing Street for an audience with the Prime Minister. With talk of a knighthood already in the air, this outsider from Dunblane is well on his way to becoming a part of the sporting establishment. So what does winning the Wimbledon title mean? Back at the scene of his triumph today, he said he was still struggling to come to terms with it.
I don't know, such a big event for British sport, something I'd heard about for a long time. It's, you know, however long it's been, over 70 years since any Brit had won Wimbledon. You know, I think that part, everything that goes with it, that'll take a little while to sink in.
Did you get much sleep last night?
No, I slept for about an hour max, but I feel okay this morning. I'm just quite happy to be sitting down.
With Wimbledon conquered, his future has never looked brighter.
The waiting is over.
Even before all this, Murray was a multi-millionaire. Now his earnings could be set to soar, especially if he can go on to win more titles and become the world #1. But how far does he think he can go?
I want to try and keep doing better. I want to try and win another Grand Slam, but I'm not going to start putting numbers on it because it took me so long to win my first one. I know how hard these tournaments are to win and how hard you need to work to do them.
Inevitably, Murray's success has prompted a debate about legacy. What Andy Murray achieved here on centre court yesterday will live long in the memory. But the challenge for British tennis is to use this moment of history to create something lasting for the future.
Nice one.
The awkward truth for British tennis is that Murray's rise to the top disguises an alarming lack of depth. At grassroots level, the picture's even more worrying, with the sports authorities facing criticism for failing to drive up participation.
Tennis in this country, I think it's got quite a bad reputation, so yeah, I hope yesterday helps with that. I hope the reputation improves and hope we can get more kids playing and see some more Grand Slam champions in the future.
That's the challenge facing British tennis now, how to use Andy Murray's breakthrough moment to create a new generation of winners.
Let's pick that up with David, who's with me now. David, how can tennis capitalise on this amazing victory?
Well, essentially there are two issues which the Lawn Tennis Association, the governing body for the sport in this country, are facing. The first is at elite level, and there the statistics are pretty damning. Andy Murray is the only man in the world top 100, while with the women, well, there's only two, Heather Watson and Laura Robson. The LTA say that the signs at junior level are promising, but this is the sort of 10 to 12-year-olds, and it could be many years before we get, you know, another player of Andy Murray's quality coming through. The second point is about participation at those grassroots, and here the concerns are even bigger perhaps. Participation numbers among adults are down, and the LTA gets about £60 million a year in funding and doesn't seem to be making any progress with that at all. So look, this is the opportunity that British tennis has been waiting for 77 years. They've really got to make the most of it.
David, thank you. David Bond, our sports editor. Children from 5 to 14 are to be taught a new national curriculum in schools in England from September next year. The revisions mean a greater focus on grammar and science with more challenging maths. The Prime Minister has described the plans as rigorous and tough. Teaching unions say the changes are being brought in too fast. Here's our education correspondent, Rita Chakrabarti.
Now, you're just going to make one more fold to start with, and that's going to then make it into quarters. So can you try and make
fractions for 5-year-olds is the new plan, although at this London school, Year 1 already gets to grips with halves and quarters. The national curriculum is the body of learning that all pupils must be taught. The government says schools in England have fallen behind international competitors, and it wants them to be more ambitious.
That's why we're demanding that children be taught how to write computer code, how to use 3D printers, how to handle more complex mathematical processes, how to appreciate a wider than ever range of literature.
So expectations of what children should achieve will change. In maths, 9-year-olds will have to learn their 12 times table. At present, it's up to the 10 times table for 11-year-olds. In science, evolution will be taught in primary school for the first time. But in history, primary pupils will only be taught up to 1066, after criticism that going further would overload young minds.
I expect you all to be sitting up straight throughout my lesson, with your hands in your lap. Your hands in your lap, boy. Put your hand down, boy!
A taste of a Victorian classroom at a London museum as part of a history trip. It may not look like it, but they all enjoy the subject. How, though, do they feel about plans to make them learn more dates?
Last year we were learning about the Tudors and I don't remember any dates, but I just remember what happened.
It is quite important to know the basics because it's all the things that are main about the main parts of the history that might be quite important.
Can anybody tell me?
Back in the modern classroom, the head here is worried by the plans.
Amend some elements of the national curriculum, but keep what we've got. It worked, it was improving, teachers have got used to it, we've resourced it. Suddenly we're having to change it all again. Not a good idea.
Lessons here the year after next will be very different, with harder topics earlier on and more to get through. Some say the timetable is just too rushed.
Changes in England are due in September 2014, and while Wales is reviewing its arrangements, in other nations there's no change. But England's academies and free schools can also choose not to follow this curriculum, which will lead to some questioning its relevance. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News.
One of Britain's most wanted criminals has been arrested in southern Spain. Mark Lilly, who's 41 and from Warrington in Cheshire, was found in a secret room concealed behind a wardrobe in a villa in Malaga. He went on the run in 2000 during a trial for drug trafficking. He was convicted and sentenced to 23 years in prison in his absence. A man accused of murdering a 4-year-old boy has told a court the child's mother was prone to violent outbursts. Daniel Pelka was allegedly starved and murdered by his mother and her partner. Their defence started today at Birmingham Crown Court. Both admit child cruelty but deny murder and causing or allowing Daniel's death. The plane that crashed at San Francisco Airport on Saturday was travelling slower than it should have been as it made its final approach. That's according to investigators. 2 people died, although there are reports one of them may have been killed by an emergency vehicle at the scene of the crash. Our North America correspondent Johnny Diamond has the story.
Look at that one. Look how
The final moments of Flight 214, caught by an amateur cameraman across the San Francisco Bay.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
This was where it ended up, a smoking wreck, fire still burning inside. There was no warning for the passengers. They jumped from what was left of the plane using emergency slides, desperate to get away.
Bang! The impact was so powerful. The captain was screaming, emergency evacuation.
2 schoolgirls were killed. Ye Meng-Yuan on the left and Wang Lingjia were Chinese students coming to California to practice their English over the summer. One of the girls may have been killed by an emergency vehicle on the runway. Flying into San Francisco too low and too slow, the Asiana flight hit a seawall. Its landing gear and its tail were ripped off. The body of the plane skidded almost 2,000 feet before it came to rest and burst into flames. There's no sign yet of any mechanical failure. The pilot had not landed this kind of plane at this airport before. Just 7 seconds before the crash, an alarm went off. The pilot tried to pull up just moments before impact, but by then it was too late. Johnny Diamond, BBC News, Washington.
Now look at the time. It's 6:15. Our top story this evening. Chaos in Cairo. Soldiers fire on supporters of the ousted Egyptian president. More than 50 people are dead. Still to come, Andy Murray's victory has lifted our spirits, says the Prime Minister. We'll be asking where it fits in British sporting history.
Coming up in Sports Day on BBC News, Liverpool have turned down a £30 million bid from Arsenal for Luis Suarez. They insist they want to keep him at Anfield.
A report on a scandal at children's homes in North Wales in the 1970s and 1980s has been published 17 years after it was suppressed for fear that the adults named might sue for libel. The Gillings report, which has now been published online, concluded that abuse was extensive and took place over a substantial number of years. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith reports.
Abused where they should have been protected. What happened to children in care homes across North Wales is now the subject of two major investigations, but attempts to expose the scale of abuse 17 years ago were suppressed. The Gillings report was commissioned by the local council, who then blocked its publication in fear of the insurance bill. Today it has been released, but with sections blanked out. It says abuse has been extensive and has taken place over an extended number of years. It warns the interests of children have almost invariably been sacrificed. There had been suicides, lives severely disrupted and disturbed. At least 12 young people are dead.
The treatment of children was bestial, really. They weren't treated like human beings, because they were regarded as delinquents whose behaviour needed to be brought under control. And that wasn't necessarily done by reason, it was done by knocking it out of them.
As a 12-year-old, Keith Gregory was abused in care. He says the council's decision to pulp the report meant victims were left vulnerable for years.
We've all got this fear, really, is how many people were allowed to still abuse people. They could have been taken off the road a long time ago. And how many people have been hurt because of this report being pulped?
The report also reveals the frustration the inquiry felt at trying to get hold of evidence from the council and from the police. It says there were serious allegations against officers, but no way to be sure they'd been properly investigated. The BBC Newsnight report last year, which led to a Tory peer being falsely accused of paedophilia, returned the spotlight to North Wales. The council which ran the homes has since been disbanded. Its former leader says it's vital the right people are now brought to justice.
It's about time that the police, the judge and all the others got together and started to be transparent, and I hope at the end of this period that we get to the truth of what happened and nothing is hidden.
Today signals a small victory for those who for years have claimed a cover-up, but it's only another chapter in a tragic story which has blighted and destroyed lives. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Mould.
Canada's Prime Minister says the area affected by Saturday's explosion still looks like a war zone. At least 5 people are confirmed dead, but scores are still missing. More than 70 runaway train cars carrying pressurised containers of crude oil exploded in Lac-Mégantic. The fires were so intense, some were still raging 36 hours on. Police warn some bodies may never be recovered. The train cars somehow managed to become uncoupled at the small Canadian town of Nantes during an overnight shift change. They then gathered speed, rolled downhill and derailed in the heart of Lac-Mégantic, some 4 miles away. As Paul Adams reports.
More than 2 days after the first explosions, a scene of devastation and lingering danger. Much of Lac-Mégantic too hazardous for investigators to examine overnight, and a death toll that seems destined to rise. Many of the missing are thought to have been drinking in a bar in the early hours of Saturday when the driverless train blew up in the centre of town.
We are still talking about around more or less 40 people that are reported missing and that we don't know their whereabouts.
One local likened it to an atomic bomb, a giant fireball as the train derailed.
Il y a vraiment beaucoup de chaleur.
And some of its 73 wagons of crude oil exploded. Dozens of nearby buildings flattened or vaporised. The reasons for all this still a mystery. The train travelled out of control for 8 miles from a nearby town. Its emerged firemen had already put out an engine fire late on Friday, minutes before the parked train simply rolled away. Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper toured the scene on Sunday, saying it was like a war zone. He may find himself answering questions about the rising volumes of crude travelling by rail from oil fields in Western Canada. A local secondary school has been turned into an emergency shelter. As many as 2,000 people, a third of the population, forced from their homes. There's uncertainty and dread here. Some people are still missing family members. Investigators are looking at whether the train's brakes were somehow switched off. The operator says one locomotive was left running to make sure the brakes worked. There are also questions about pollution. An unknown quantity of fuel has spilled into a nearby river and lake. It's feared this could yet turn into Canada's most deadly rail disaster in more than 50 years. Paul Adams, BBC News, Washington.
The Post Office has admitted there have been bugs in a computer system at the centre of a bitter dispute with sub-postmasters who say they were wrongly prosecuted for fraud. More than 100 sub-postmasters may sue the Post Office after they say they were forced to pay back tens of thousands of pounds after their Post Office computers created non-existent shortfalls. Some have lost their livelihoods and homes as a result. A handful have served prison sentences.
There's a 90p change.
The Conservative chairman Grant Shapps has insisted his party's members do a fantastic job up and down the UK. He was speaking after a survey of more than 850 Tory members suggested that more than half felt they were not respected by the party leadership, and almost 1 in 5 were seriously considering voting UKIP. Our deputy political editor James Landale has the story.
The Conservative Party at play. Grassroots members gathered for a party in Kent, a thank you from their MP Bob Stewart for their work over the year. With all the positive economic news, Labour disarray and Abu Qatada's departure, their mood is as sunny as the weather.
That's a Conservative dog.
But dig a little deeper and there are some worries.
What can I say about UKIP? They're certainly not gadflies, fruitcakes and loons. They express a very valid concern of very, very many Conservative-minded people.
I think we're a bit wishy-washy at times, and I think it would be better. I suppose I'm saying go back to Margaret Thatcher and say this is what we're going to do.
Gay marriage makes no difference to me at all. However, in Beckenham we have a mature membership and some of them feel quite strongly about it.
I'm a bit on the old foreign aid. I think you should look after your own before you look after everyone else.
If David Cameron's going to win a majority at the next general election, he has to appeal to the country and not just his party. But he needs folk like these to knock on doors and spread the word. And behind the smiles, there are some concerns. Concerns that are echoed in a survey of 850 Tory members by YouGov for Queen Mary University of London and Sussex University that suggests that 19% of Tory members are seriously considering voting UKIP. More than half, 53%, believe they're not respected by the party leadership. And only 19% believe the Conservatives will win an overall majority at the next election. At Westminster, Tory MPs are less gloomy, and the party chairman insisted the Conservatives were winning supporters, if not members.
Well, here's a party that just on Friday voted together for this EU referendum bill. Enormously popular, doesn't matter where you stand on the issue, people think it's time to have a choice. And no, I think that nowadays what people do is join a party, or not necessarily join, but still come out and campaign, and there are lots of different ways of doing that.
But the survey suggests that members like these across the country are becoming less active, and the gap between them and the party leadership is as wide as ever. In less than 2 years from an election, that's a gap the party will want to narrow. James Landale, BBC News in Kent.
Let's go back now to yesterday's triumphant scenes at Wimbledon, where Andy Murray's victory was watched by a peak audience of more than 17 million viewers. This afternoon, the Prime Minister invited him to Downing Street, saying his win had lifted the spirits of the whole country. So, what does his victory mean for people, and are we feeling more like a nation of winners? Andy Swiss reports.
The waiting is over.
It was the moment that united a nation in celebration. From Centre Court to Murray Mound, from Hyde Park to Plymouth, At pubs, picnics and parties across the country, rarely has Britain felt quite so deliriously happy.
Andy Murray is the Wimbledon champion.
Today, in a sun-drenched Wimbledon village, the players and the fans might have gone, but the feel-good factor certainly hasn't.
Andy Murray, Wimbledon champion, how good does that sound?
Very, very good. Very, very proud of him. And it was, I think I saw something like it was 77 years on the 7th of July, the 7th month, so it all seemed to come together.
It was lovely to watch, to see the sort of reactions, everyone putting it up on Facebook, their videos of when they were watching it, just the sheer sort of excitement that sort of swept across like a bit like a Mexican wave. It was lovely.
Last year was great when the whole nation got together, and it's great to see it again this year.
It's a golden...
After last year's glorious Olympics and Paralympics, where Murray himself was among the champions, these are heady days for British sport. Some even believe the national identity is being redefined.
Andy Murray's win was really important from the perspective of building on what happened in the Olympics. So I think what's happened is that we've become a nation of expecting our athletes to be nearly men, to expecting them to win. And I think that's transferring across to the athletes themselves.
But this British victory is also, of course, a Scottish one. And in Murray's hometown Dunblane, the pride was plain to see.
I can't believe he won it 3 straight sets, which is like amazing, especially against Djokovic, #1 in the world.
Yeah, he's a great inspiration. He inspired me last year to play more.
Rarely has a tennis player then given quite such joy to quite so many. Andy Murray's delight, it seems, is also Britain's. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Look at that, they're on.
And it's still sunny as well. Here's Nina Ridge with the weather. Hello.
Thanks. The sunshine definitely helps. And in fact, for Scotland, it's been the hottest day of the year so far. Also for Northern Ireland as well. Hasn't been the case everywhere with that heat. We've had some stubborn cloud around the Wash, just 16 degrees here, and a touch cooler right on the Aberdeenshire coastline. For most through the night tonight, it stays fine and dry and also warm, those temperatures being held up. We'll see the return of that low cloud just drifting in off the North Sea, becoming quite extensive, perhaps reaching the Bristol Channel through the early hours, and we'll see more cloud across northern Scotland as well. As we start tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, temperatures already sitting at 19 degrees underneath those blue skies across southwest England. Some sunshine right along the south coast towards Kent and Sussex. We will start with a bit more overcast down through the East Midlands, and I think we'll start to see some patchy cloud developing for northern parts of Scotland as well. And here we'll see a little bit of rain, perhaps the rain a touch heavier across Shetland, with temperatures sitting just above 12 degrees. As we go through the morning then, we've got that cloud and patchy rain still flirting with northern Scotland, but we're much more hopeful we're going to clear that cloud away from northeast England tomorrow afternoon, helping to lift the temperatures. Underneath that sunshine for all of us, it will be another hot day. We've got 26, 27 degrees, perhaps not quite as warm along the coast of East Anglia, and for northern Scotland with that weather front around about 15 or 16 degrees. Now that weather front brings a change for some of us on Wednesday. It is a cold front moving its way south, not bringing much rain but staying fairly cloudy, and temperatures just starting to tail off underneath those more overcast skies. So Wednesday afternoon sees temperatures perhaps around the mid to low 20s, with the highest of the temperatures at that stage still holding on down across the southwest, where we'll have some more sunshine. There's always more details on our weather website. Sian.
Thank you, Nina. Nina Ridge. And that's it from the BBC News at 6 team. Goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams wherever you are. Goodbye for now.